Donald J. Trump is not the first and won't be the last American president to create jitters about the First Amendment. But what is happening today is perhaps even more insidious, a relentless campaign against the very credibility of the news media. This is a glorious tradition. You folks are part of it, and we can't have politicians trampling on it with impunity.
People are doubting the news media. That's wrong. You're seeing misinformation masquerading as news, they're telling us. And actually, they're right. We have seen a lot of that recently. How about the last 2 years of Russia coverage on CNN, for example? Michael Cohen met secretly with Russian spies in Prague. Don Jr. is about to be indicted. The Steele dossier is entirely real. They told us all of that and much more, all of it wrong and stupid and totally dishonest. The New York Times and the Washington Post won Pulitzers for what turned out to be misinformation masquerading as news. Last Saturday night would have been a perfect moment, actually, to apologize for that debacle and return the prizes they won. But no, nobody apologized. Nobody returned a Pulitzer. Instead, they celebrated themselves. No surprise there. That's what they do. What was odd, though, was hearing them talk about free speech. The First Amendment is, in fact, under ferocious attack, really more than any time in the last 50 years at least. And yet the people in that room don't seem to notice. Where were these same people last summer when the big tech companies colluded to silence broadcaster Alex Jones? Alex Jones, he's bad. CNN literally led the effort to make him be quiet. Jeff Zucker doesn't agree with Alex Jones's political views. Therefore, he thinks Alex Jones shouldn't be allowed to talk. So Zucker shut him up by force. Did anyone at Saturday's dinner mention any of that? And where were they when Facebook and Twitter blocked ads supporting Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn because they criticized abortion? Where were they when Tommy Robinson went to prison in the UK for having unfashionable views about immigration? Where were they when James Damore got fired and then slandered by Google for questioning the company's diversity theology? Where were they when Peter Vlaming lost his job teaching in Virginia because he wouldn't use male pronouns to describe a female student? Did any of the First Amendment defenders, here's the First Amendment, they say, at the dinner on Saturday say a single word about any of this? Of course they didn't. Their job, they say, is to hold the powerful to account. But when given the chance to push back against the truly powerful, the actually powerful, we're not even kidding powerful, Google, Amazon, Facebook, PayPal, do they say anything? Ever? No, of course not. They suck up every single time. They suck up to power because that's who they are. Dutiful toadies to the powerful, defending class interests and pretending it is principle. Fine, that's who they are. Just don't lecture us about speech, please. Chris Plante hosts the Chris Plante Show right here in Washington, and he joins us tonight. And I should also say, by way of intro, that you're a member of the media, of the White House press corps, actually, of 30 years standing. Yep. This seems like the one group that ought to be defending free speech, but that isn't.
No, it's a catastrophic fail. I didn't watch it live, but I did DVR the dinner, and I've been to many of the dinners, as you have, over the years. And I watched it yesterday morning, and I took notes because it's my job, and I'm really embarrassed for them. I think they're unembarrassable. But for 8 years, President Obama racked up what has to be, and what the ACLU described as one of the worst First Amendment records in presidential history. The ACLU described him as a terrible First Amendment president, all right? A terrible First Amendment president. On the campaign, they had 3 newspapers on the press plane for Obama in 2008 that did not endorse Barack Obama for president, but endorsed John McCain for president. All 3 of those reporters, those three newspapers, were kicked off of Barack Obama's campaign plane. That was in 2008. That was just sort of getting the ball rolling. During the course of the 8 years, they squeezed out Fox News. Anita Dunn, who was the communications director for Obama, refused to allow Fox to participate in very important conference calls having to do with Benghazi, CIA briefings having to do with Benghazi. They know where their bread is buttered, and those people at the dinner are lackeys for the Obama administration, for the Democrat Party. Fox News didn't sing from the sheet music, so they were targeted by the Obama administration. The Obama administration also spied on the Associated Press because there was a leak that they were not happy with. They like to control their leaks. So phones used by at least 100 reporters with the Associated Press were tapped. The records were where they listened to the conversations, but they got the phone records to see who they're talking to. The Associated Press called it an unprecedented intrusion, and it was, in fact, an unprecedented intrusion. They spied on James Risen at the New York Times because he received a leak. They spied on phone records and other communications and so on, and at the New York Times. And his work and home email and phones were targeted. James Rosen, who you know formerly of the Fox News Channel now, they spied on, you mentioned, they spied on his parents who live in New York. They got phone records. This is the Obama administration, which is the heartthrob still of
I don't remember
the news media.
anybody standing, and like you, I've been to these dinners for, almost 30 years. I don't remember anybody standing at the head of the room lecturing President Obama.
No, for 8 years they cheered him and they toasted him and they had tears in their eyes and nobody mentioned it. Look, he also bombed more countries than any president since World War II. He targeted and killed Americans overseas without due process. Nobody seems to mind any of this stuff. 8 years of Obama, and it was a love fest at the White House Correspondents' Dinner year after year after year. And now suddenly the First Amendment is under threat, not because the president has kicked news organizations that provide him with unfavorable coverage off of Air Force One or out of the press pool. They have that Jim Acosta problem. But honestly, CNN, if it were an actual news organization, would have pulled Jim Acosta out of the White House long ago. He's not a legitimate reporter. He can't be seen as a legitimate
So would
reporter.
you agree that if you cared about speech and the First Amendment, you'd be very upset about book banning? Banning books. That's the hallmark of a totalitarian society, correct?
It is.
So Amazon is doing that.
Yeah.
Amazon really is the first and last word in book selling when they control the whole market.
Right.
So when they ban a book, it ceases to exist. I never see any coverage of that. Is that related to the fact that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post?
Well, and you mentioned also Twitter and others banning voices that deviate from really the party doctrine, capital T, capital P, the party.
Exactly.
The party controls, it's very Orwellian. It's quite disturbing. It should be disturbing to the people in that room, but they don't stand for the First Amendment. They don't stand for freedom of speech or freedom of press or for any of it. And sometimes they kick their feet if somebody gets in their way when they're barging through a doorway. But that's about it. It's all self-interest. It's not about, and it's about the party. Let's face it. Let's just call it what it is.
But we need someone to stand up for actual speech.
Well,
which really is under attack.
Well, I can tell you, I do it on my show. You do it on your show.
I mean it.
And it really is under threat. I grew up in a media household, a news household, and I believed in the First Amendment. I believed in journalism. It's one of the reasons I had to leave CNN and journalism is because I really believe in facts. I believe in the truth. The truth. It's a crazy idea. And the lies that we're being tube-fed, the American people are being tube-fed on a daily basis, are truly an outrage. And these are the people that are tube-feeding us the lie. And you listed several of them. There are many more.
You're right.
Covington Catholic. CNN, hilariously, was given an honorary mention the other night at the Correspondents' Dinner for their coverage of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I'm not making this up. They were given an honorary mention because they couldn't get one of the big awards. They were given an honorary mention for, and the big award went to a Washington Post reporter for reporting the story. And they were talking about how brave he was to report the story that Dick Durbin told him about, where President Trump used a bad word in a closed-door meeting with adults in a secure room in the White House.
When Trump is gone, it'll be clear that there's nothing left of the media. Really, they've destroyed themselves.
Appalling.
Chris Plante, thank you so much
Tucker.
for that perspective.